My name is Dr. Elias Crowe, and I'm the only surgeon for Area 51's visitors. Yeah, you heard that right. The ones they drag in from the crashes, the abductions, the endless night skies over the Nevada desert, not the tourists with their tinfoil hats and conspiracy theories. The real visitors. The bodies that aren't human. I've been cutting into them for 15 years now, piecing together what the government can't explain and doesn't want the world to know. It's not a job you apply for. It's one that finds you, usually after you've seen too much or lost everything worth keeping. It started in med school, back when I thought I was destined for some prestigious hospital in Boston, saving lives with clean scalpels and fluorescent lights. But one night during a rotation in emergency trauma, a black van pulled up unannounced. No sirens, no paperwork. They hauled in a pilot, Air Force, they said, who'd ejected from a test flight gone wrong. His eyes were wrong, though. Too large, pupils like oil slicks reflecting stars that weren't there. I stabilized him, but when I opened him up later in surgery, his blood didn't clot right. It shimmered, like mercury under the OR lamps. The brass showed up before I could even stitch him, offered me a choice. Join the program or spend the rest of my days in a psych ward labeled a national security risk. I chose the scalpel. Now I'm here, buried under the Groom Lake facility in a labyrinth of concrete bunkers that stretch deeper than any mine. The operating theater is my domain, a sterile chamber buried 3 levels down, where the air hums with the low throb of generators masking something older, something that whispers through the vents. The walls are reinforced titanium, etched with symbols I don't recognize, curved lines that twist like veins under pressure. No windows, of course. The only light comes from banks of cold LEDs that flicker when the visitors are near, as if the electricity itself recoils. The table is cold steel, bolted to the floor, surrounded by monitors that track vitals no human body should have. Electromagnetic pulses instead of heartbeats, radiation spikes that burn through lead shielding, and the tools. God, the tools. Scalpels that bend light, clamps forged from alloys we haven't named yet, sutures that writhe like living thread if you don't handle them just right. But it's the rules that keep me alive. They drilled them into me on day 1, in a briefing room lit by a single red bulb, with a faceless officer whose voice echoed like it was coming from underwater. Rule 1, never look directly into their eyes during procedure. Those orbs aren't made for our light. They pull at your mind, unraveling memories you didn't know you had. I learned that the hard way with my first patient. A slender thing, all limbs and no joints, recovered from a saucer wedged in the sand dunes. Its skin was like wet leather, cool to the touch, and when I made the incision, a mist escaped that tasted of ozone and regret. The eyes opened mid-cut, black as the void, and for a split second I saw my own death. Not quick, but stretched across eons, my bones dissolving in starlight. I blacked out, woke up with the procedure logged as complete, but my hands shook for weeks. They told me it was a neural echo. Now I wear the visor, tinted like smoked glass, mandatory for all shifts. Rule 2. During night rotations, when the desert winds howl and the base goes silent except for the distant rumble of patrols, you secure the chamber 3 times over. Locks, seals, and the salt line. Yeah, actual salt, poured along the thresholds by orderlies in hazmat suits. The visitors don't come willingly. Some wake up feral, their forms shifting under the sheets like smoke. The nights are the worst. When the moon hangs low and bloated over the restricted zone, that's when the entities stir, not just the bodies on the table, but the shadows between them. I've heard footsteps in the corridors, soft and deliberate, like bare feet on tile that shouldn't be there. Once, during a midnight appendectomy on what they classified as a gray variant, the lights dipped and the monitors screamed with interference. Something brushed my shoulder, cold, insistent, like fingers made of fog. I didn't turn. Rule 3 is clear. If you feel the touch, recite the code phrase and keep cutting. Echo protocol initiated, I muttered, my voice barely above the scalpel's whine. The thing retreated, but the patient's wounds sealed themselves wrong, bubbling with a fluid that etched the table like acid. These rules aren't just protocol, they're survival etched in blood. Mostly mine, sometimes theirs. Break one, and the consequences ripple. I saw it happen to Dr. Ramirez, my predecessor, though they say he was transferred. He was cocky, skipped the salt line one stormy night, thinking it was superstition. The visitor that night was different, taller, with skin like fractured obsidian, pulled from a crater that glowed for days. Ramirez looked into its eyes, laughed it off as a trick of the light. By morning, he was gone. But his screams echoed through the vents until dawn. They found his badge in the scrub sink, melted into the porcelain, and his notes, pages of scrawled equations that predicted the end of gravity itself. Now, his office is sealed, labeled contaminated, and the air in there still smells like burnt wiring and something sweeter, like overripe fruit. The base hides more than bodies. Whispers among the staff, janitors who clean up the spills, techs who wipe the drives, talk of archives deeper down, levels where the real experiments happen, not surgery, but communion. They've been bringing these visitors in since Roswell, maybe before, and not all of them are dying on the table. Some integrate, or so the rumors go, hybrid programs, tech harvested from flesh that defies biology. My own scars tell the story, faint lines along my ribs from an accident early on when a patient's limb regenerated and latched onto me like a parasite. It whispered in my dreams after, fragments of languages that sound like wind through canyons on Mars. I don't ask questions anymore. Questions lead to reassignments, and reassignments mean the desert swallows you whole. Last week, during a routine autopsy on a fresh arrival, limbs folded wrong, eyes sewn shut with its own filaments, the power cut out completely, no backup, no hum, just darkness, thick as tar. In that void I heard it, a chorus, low and rhythmic, seeping from the walls. Not voices exactly, but vibrations that crawled under my skin, mapping my veins. The salt line glowed faintly, holding it back, but I could feel the pressure building, like the chamber was a balloon about to burst. When the light snapped on, the body was upright, staring through the seams of its lids. "They see you," it rasped, in a voice like grinding glass. Not my imagination, where the recorder caught it, though the file vanished by shift's end. I don't know how much longer I can do this. The rules are fraying, the shadows thicker each night. If you're hearing this, stay away from the lights in the sky. They're not coming for peace. They're marking territory, and we're the trespassers. But tonight's shift starts soon, and the van's already rumbling outside. Another visitor, they say. I pick up the scalpel, check the visor, pour the salt, one cut at a time, holding back the dark, for now. The van's tires crunched over the gravel like bones underfoot as it pulled into the loading bay, the sound echoing off the concrete walls that swallowed sound whole. I stood there in the dim red glow of the emergency lights, salt crystals still gritty between my fingers, the scalpel heavy in my gloved hand. The air thickened, carrying that familiar tang of scorched metal and something fouler, like meat left too long in the sun. Another visitor, they said over the intercom, fresh from a retrieval op in the restricted zone, coordinates blacked out even from me. I didn't need details. The hum in my fillings told me enough. Electromagnetic residue, the kind that lingers after something tears through our reality like wet paper. They wheeled it in on a gurney reinforced with titanium restraints, the orderlies avoiding my eyes as always, faceless in their suits, voices muffled through respirators. The body was shrouded in a containment sheet, but the outline was wrong. Elongated torso, limbs splayed at angles that mocked human anatomy. A head too narrow, crowned with what looked like vestigial antennae twitching faintly under the fabric. The monitors lit up as they transferred it to the table, vitals spiking erratically, pulses that weren't heartbeats but resonances, like tuning forks struck in another dimension. I adjusted my visor, the smoked glass warping the edges of everything into a haze, and began the prep. Rule 4. Always start with the peripheral cuts. Never go for the core until the containment field is active. The core is where they hide, the nests, the eggs, the things that hatch if you give them a moment's warmth. The field hummed to life, a dome of blue energy shimmering over the table, but tonight it flickered, unstable, as if the visitor was already pushing back. I made the first incision along what passed for its thigh, the skin parting like overripe fruit, releasing a vapor that fogged my visor and burned at the back of my throat. No blood, not really, just a viscous gel that oozed and then retracted, trying to knit itself shut. That's when I felt it, the shift. The air pressure dropped, vents whispering secrets in a language of static and size. Night rotation protocol kicked in. Double-check the seals. Recite the phrase if the shadows lengthen. But shadows don't just lengthen here. They pool, congealing in the corners where the LEDs can't reach, forming tendrils that taste the air. As I worked deeper, probing for what the brief called a neural implant, the body stirred. Not a twitch, a deliberate uncoiling, like a fern unfurling in reverse. Its antennae quivered, and from the slit of its mouth, or was it a gill, came a sound, not a groan, but a frequency that drilled into my skull, sinking with the ache behind my eyes. I froze, scalpel hovering. Rule 5. If it sings, amplify the white noise. I hit the switch, and the chamber filled with a piercing whine designed to disrupt their harmonics. It worked mostly, the singing cut off, but the monitors went haywire, displaying fractals that looked like maps of impossible cities, spires twisting into infinities. In that moment, visor or no, I glimpsed its eyes, cracking open, slits of iridescence, reflecting not the room, but fragments of my life. My wife's face from before the van, the med school dorms, a childhood swing set under a sky full of shooting stars that weren't stars. I pushed through, forcing the implant free, a nodule of crystal veined with light, pulsing like a trapped star. It burned my forceps, melting the alloy on contact, and when I dropped it into the containment vial, the glass cracked, leaking a haze that made the salt line sizzle. That's when the touch came again, colder this time, wrapping around my ankle like a lover's hand gone wrong. Fog fingers, insistent, pulling downward. Echo protocol initiated, I whispered, voice lost in the whine, and kept cutting. But it didn't retreat fully. It lingered, a pressure building in the room, the walls groaning as if the mountain itself was waking. By the time I sealed the final layer, sutures writhing into place like obedient worms, the visitor was still, but changed. Its form had subtly altered, edges blurring where flesh met shadow, as if part of it had slipped away into the ether. The orderlies hauled it out without a word, leaving me to scrub down, the gel residue clinging to my skin like accusation. In the sink, under the harsh water, I saw the scars on my arms flare, those parasitic lines from years ago, itching now, as if remembering. That's when I noticed the note, slipped into my locker during the procedure, handwritten, no signature. The cores are waking, check level 7, before the convergence. Level 7. I'd heard the whispers, deeper than my theater, where the archives bled into something else. Not just storage, but incubation. The base wasn't built to contain. It was built to harbor. Hybrids, they said in the janitor's tales grown from harvested parts, walking among us now in bore rooms and bunkers. But convergence, that word hung like a noose. I shouldn't have gone, but the itch spread, the dreams bleeding into waking hours. Late that shift, after the halls emptied and the patrols droned overhead, I slipped my key card into the service elevator, descending past the warnings etched in the panels. Authorized personnel only. Breach equals termination. The doors open to a corridor lit by bioluminescent strips pulsing like veins. No sterile white here. Walls slick with condensation. Air heavy with the scent of earth after rain, mixed with something metallic, alive. Footsteps echoed ahead, not mine. Soft, multiple, converging. I followed, heart hammering against Rule 6. Never venture below your clearance. But the note burned in my pocket, and the shadows urged me on, whispering promises of truth. The chamber at the end was vast, a cavern retrofitted with tanks, dozens, humming with contained light. Inside, forms floated, hybrids, half human, half other, their faces serene but eyes vacant, mouths moving in silent pleas. And in the center, a nexus, a writhing mass of tendrils connecting them, pulsing with the same rhythm I'd cut from the visitor upstairs. That's when I saw Ramirez, or what was left, not transferred, not gone, fused, his body twisted into the mass, skin stretched translucent over alien graphs, eyes, those oil-slick eyes, fixed on me. "Elias," it rasped, voice a chorus of the damned. "They chose you because you broke first. The visitors aren't crashing. They're arriving. And the rules, they're for us, not them." The tendrils reached, saltless barriers crumbling under their touch. I backed away, the elevator doors sealing just as the song started again, louder, pulling at the frayed edges of my mind. Convergence wasn't a warning. It was now. The base wasn't holding them back. It was calling them home. And I, the surgeon, was just another incision waiting to be made. Upstairs, the alarms blared as I stumbled into the light, hands shaking, the note dissolving like ash in my grip. The next shift loomed, but the dark had already seeped in. One more cut, and it might be my own. The alarms pierced the air like shattered glass, red strobes pulsing through the corridors as I bolted from the elevator, my scrubs soaked with sweat that carried the metallic tang of Level 7's underbelly. My mind reeled, fragments of Ramirez's fused form clinging like afterimages, his mouth a maw of grafted flesh, spilling truths that wormed into my thoughts. The visitors aren't crashing. They're arriving. The rules were a lie, a cage for the surgeons, not the entities. I slammed into the scrub room, hands fumbling under the faucet, but the water ran black, swirling with flecks of that viscous gel from the table. It coated my skin, warm now, seeping into the old scars along my ribs, making them throb like fresh wounds. I couldn't stay. The base was alive, its concrete veins contracting around me, drawing me deeper. But the shift wasn't over. Another visitor, they buzzed over the intercom, voice distorted as if filtered through water. Urgency laced it, the kind that meant containment breach imminent. I grabbed the visor, the salt shaker, empty now, crystals scattered like failed wards, and headed back to the theater. The halls twisted under the alarms, shadows leaping from alcoves, footsteps multiplying behind me. Not patrols, something else, slithering in the ducts, testing the edges of my resolve. The operating chamber doors hissed open, and there it was, the next arrival, already strapped down, the gurney dented from whatever struggle brought it here. This one was smaller, almost childlike in stature, but its form undulated beneath the sheet, ripples like water disturbed by unseen currents. The orderlies were gone, vanished mid-transfer, their suits slumped empty in the corner like discarded skins. Monitors flickered with warnings, containment field offline, neural interference critical. I approached, scalpel trembling in my grip, the air thick with ozone and a sweeter rot, like flowers blooming in decay. Rule 1 echoed in my head. Never look into the eyes. But the visor fogged instantly, as if breathed on from within. I wiped it clear, and that's when the sheet slipped, revealing not flesh, but a lattice of translucent membranes, veined with lights that pulsed in sync with the alarms. Its head lolled, no face at first, just a smooth expanse that bubbled and reformed, birthing orbs that weren't eyes but portals, swirling vortices sucking in the room's light, spitting back glimpses of other worlds, shattered moons, skies alive with writhing storms, cities of bone and crystal crumbling under endless night. I made the cut, peripheral as always, along the limb that mimicked an arm. The blade sank in too easily, parting layers that whispered as they separated, secrets in a tongue that tasted of ash on my tongue. Gel poured out, but this time it sought me, tendrils questing upward, latching onto the scalpel and pulling it toward my wrist. I yanked back, reciting the protocol under my breath, but the words tangled, the white noise switched dead. The singing started then, not from the table but everywhere, the vents, the walls, the very hum of the generators harmonizing into a dirge that vibrated my bones, syncing my pulse to its rhythm. Flashbacks hit like surgical strikes. The black van from med school, the pilot's shimmering blood, Ramirez's melted badge. But deeper, institutional lies unraveled. The briefings weren't warnings, they were invitations. Area 51 wasn't a prison for the visitors. It was a beacon, broadcasting signals into the void since the 40s, luring them with promises of alliance. The crashes, orchestrated arrivals, bodies, harvested not for study, but for integration. Hybrids weren't rumors. They were the endgame, staff like me seeded with grafts to bridge the gap. My scars burned hotter, splitting open to reveal not scar tissue, but filaments. Glowing faintly, threading toward my heart, the entity on the table convulsed, restraints snapping like brittle bone, its form expanding to fill the space between us. I felt the touch again, not fog this time, but solid, claws of shadow raking my back, drawing lines that wept that same gel. It pulled me down, the table buckling under impossible weight, and, in the struggle, the visor shattered, forcing me to meet those portals head-on. My life unspooled. Not just memories, but futures. Me fused like Ramirez, cutting into my own kind under starlit skies, the desert blooming with arrivals that walked as men. The base's secrets flooded in. Level 7 was just the nursery. Deeper still, the core chamber where the first visitor slumbered, a colossal thing that birthed the program, its dreams shaping policy, presidents, the very fabric of denial. I fought, scalpel plunging into the mass, but it laughed. A frequency that cracked the monitors, sparks raining like falling stars. Consequences of broken rules cascaded. No salt, no seals, and the dark poured through. The entity enveloped me, membranes cool and insistent, rewriting my nerves with whispers of belonging. "Join the convergence," it hummed. Ramirez's voice layered in. "The surgeons are the bridge. They've always been." In that suspended horror, revelation hit like a final incision. I wasn't the only surgeon, never had been. The predecessors weren't transferred or lost. They ascended, becoming part of the network, their minds piloting the hybrids, now patrolling the halls, the vans, the skies. The government knew. Hell, they worshipped it. Area 51 was the womb, and we were the midwives, birthing an invasion disguised as evolution. The alarms peaked, lights shattering in cascades, plunging the theater into void. I blacked out to the song, waking not in recovery but strapped to the table. Orderlies, no, hybrids, faces subtly wrong, wheeling me toward the elevator. My hands, gloved and steady, held a new scalpel, one that bent light into promises. The itch was gone, replaced by purpose, cold and eternal. If you're out there, listening to this confession smuggled on a drive before they wipe it, run. The lights in the sky aren't visitors anymore. They're us, returning home. And the next crash? It'll be your door they knock on. The rules were never for survival. They were for surrender. One cut at a time, we've let them in. God, help us all.